Bitcoin worth millions of pounds, stolen from what should have been the most secure digital vault in the country, from the very people whose job it is to catch crypto criminals. A theft so clean, so perfectly executed that it remained undetected for years. Sometimes, the most difficult criminal to catch is the one standing right beside you. The National Crime Agency are top specialists, Britain's FBI. Their job? Take down the country's most sophisticated hardcore criminals, drug cartels, human traffickers, and now the shadowy crooks lurking in cryptocurrency's dark corners. One of the agency's most celebrated triumphs had been shutting down Silk Road 2.0, the notorious dark web marketplace where creeps could use Bitcoin to buy anything from heroin to hitmen. In 2014, after a year of painstaking investigation, they finally brought down the site's malevolent criminal mastermind, Thomas White. White had built an underworld empire worth millions, all powered by cryptocurrency transactions that he thought were untraceable. His arrest was a massive victory. The authorities seized everything: servers, computers, and, crucially, White's Bitcoin wallets. They contained 97 Bitcoin, worth a cool 115,000 pounds at that time. The stash was evidence in one of the most important cybercrime cases the UK had ever prosecuted. The NCA's crime fighters were determined to keep it secure. Multiple layers of protection, the kind of systems that would make a bank jealous. These weren't rookies handling loose change. They were elite investigators who understood cryptocurrency better than almost anyone in law enforcement, but not well enough. Even these supposed experts had failed to account for the weakest link in their security, and it was going to come back to bite them. Although the NCA was proud of its rigorous protocols, in the early 2010s, they were still learning how to deal with digital assets like cryptocurrency. Processes for securing and tracking virtual holdings were still being developed. At this point, regular audits weren't routine. But in May 2017, 3 years after White's arrest, the NCA team decided to have a peek inside White's crypto wallets. And that's when they noticed something they weren't expecting. The wallets should have contained 97 Bitcoin. Instead, there were only 47. 50 Bitcoin, worth tens of thousands of pounds, gone. Investigators were perplexed, but oddly, not alarmed. Maybe it was a clerical error, they thought. But as investigators dug deeper, the easy explanations fell apart. This key piece of evidence in a major case involving the underworld's internet had been deliberately moved out of the secure wallet. But how? And by whom? The obvious suspect was White himself. The man was a cybercrime genius after all. Perhaps he'd hidden some kind of digital deadman switch, a way to access his Bitcoin remotely, even from prison. It was the kind of sophisticated scheme the investigators had come to expect from him. Except, White was locked up. No computer access, no internet, no way to execute the kind of complex cryptocurrency transactions. The experts were stumped by what seemed like an unsolvable puzzle. It remained unsolvable for 5 long years. Then, out of the blue, they got a phone call that turned the investigation on its head. The call came in early 2022. Thomas White. He'd served his time, been released on license, and now he had something to say. It was the kind of accusation that investigators never want to hear. An inside job, a betrayal from within their own ranks. If White's theory was correct, then the country's top law enforcement team had been robbed by someone with the highest security clearance, someone with intimate knowledge of their procedures, someone they worked alongside every day. Conducting an investigation when you don't know who you can trust, using tools and methods that the target had been trusted to know and wield. They also needed to crack the case fast. The value of those 50 stolen Bitcoin, once just a few thousand pounds, was now in the millions. Every passing day increased the likelihood that the funds would be lost forever. What had started as a perplexing puzzle had become one of the largest financial crimes in the agency's history, and according to White, the thief had been hiding in plain sight all along. When you're investigating someone who knows how investigations work, the rules have to change. Challenge number 1, how to investigate within the team. The suspect pool was unusually small. Only a handful of people had the technical knowledge to move Bitcoin securely. Even fewer had the kind of privileged access needed to reach the seized wallets. Even worse, this had to have been someone who understood the agency's blind spots well enough to exploit them. To sniff out the culprit, the investigators turned to the blockchain itself. Cryptocurrency's greatest irony is that it's a technology designed for privacy that creates the most comprehensive financial records in human history. Investigators descended upon the permanent public ledger that records every Bitcoin transaction ever made and started tracing. They discovered that the stolen Bitcoin hadn't just been moved from one account to another. The thief had tried to cover their tracks. The coins had been split, shuffled, and scattered across dozens of addresses, the kind of microtransactions designed to create confusion. But blockchains don't lie. Investigators mapped out the digital trail. They tracked the Bitcoin through mixing services, sophisticated tools designed to scramble transaction histories. They traced it as it was broken into smaller and smaller pieces, each move attempting to hide the connection between the original theft and its final destination. What they had uncovered was a masterclass in digital money laundering. Whoever had done this understood both the technology and the psychology of investigation. They knew all too well how to make law enforcement look in all the wrong places, but they made one mistake. They had left evidence in the one place they thought no one would ever look. A word of advice: if you're a crooked cop, don't leave evidence of your crimes in your office. An NCA team member had forgotten that key rule. His name was Paul Charles. Charles had been the kind of person you'd trust with your life. An intelligence investigator, clean record, respected by colleagues, a trusted guardian of digital evidence, the kind of quiet professional who did his job well and never drew attention to himself. He'd been part of the team that helped bring down Thomas White and Silk Road 2.0. This high-tech crook made a low-tech mistake. When the police searched Charles's office, they found notebooks. Nothing unusual about that, except that they contained usernames, passwords, and account details for Thomas White's cryptocurrency holdings, information that only someone with privileged access to evidence could possess. Charles's iPhone told an even more damning story. Browser histories showed searches for cryptocurrency mixing services, tutorials on digital money laundering, guides for converting Bitcoin to cash without detection, screenshot after screenshot of transaction confirmations. It was Paul Charles's pattern of spending that revealed the true scope of his crime. Charles had turned the stolen Bitcoin into a personal cash machine. Through services like CryptoPay and Wirex, he'd converted his digital loot into debit cards. Through one service alone, he executed 279 transactions for a total of £23,000. He put another £80,000 through other channels. He made small purchases, nothing flashy, but rather the kind of careful, methodical withdrawals that wouldn't trigger automated fraud detection. But what do you think was the moment everything truly unraveled for the cop? Was it the greed, the arrogance, or thinking he could outsmart the system? Drop your take in the comments below. For years, he'd been living off stolen Bitcoin, one tiny transaction at a time, and with every single one, he betrayed his colleagues, undermining the reputation of the very agency he worked for. He had become a criminal himself, and he'd almost gotten away with it. The once trusted NCA investigator was arrested in May 2022 and charged with theft, transferring criminal property, and concealing criminal property. The true scale of his treachery had been exposed in detail. By the time he stood in Liverpool Crown Court, realizing that the evidence against him was overwhelming, he pleaded guilty to all charges. Charles was sent away for 5.5 years. In passing sentence, Justice David Aubrey let him have it with both barrels. Had you not been arrested, you would have continued to reap the rewards of your wrongdoing. This was a crime that grew more valuable with time. The 50 Bitcoin Charles stole in 2017 were worth just under £60,000 when he took them. Had he left them untouched, by the time of his sentencing, they would have been worth over £4.4 million. But he hadn't kept them untouched. By the time prosecutors added up his spending, Charles had benefited to the tune of more than £613,000. The Crown Prosecution Service launched proceedings to recover as much of the stolen value as possible, seizing Bitcoin worth nearly £470,000. The rest, nearly $150,000, had already been spent and was gone forever. But that was just the monetary cost. Charles' crime had shattered trust in the very institution responsible for digital crime fighting. The NCA formally sacked Charles on July 11, 2025. They spoke of the importance of accountability and integrity, but the agency's reputation had already taken a hit. The Charles saga reminds us once again that the most dangerous threats don't always come from shadowy hackers or dark web criminals. Sometimes they come from the person you absolutely trust, sitting at the desk next to you. For entrepreneurs, this case is a stark reminder. Every action in a digital system leaves a footprint. Integrity is as non-negotiable as security. If you found this story insightful, please like and subscribe. Share your thoughts on digital trust in the comments.